Welcome back, everyone, to the next episode of Critical Moves. Today I'm joined by a special guest. It's Joe Beard, who runs the Example of Play YouTube channel. Joe, how are you doing? All right?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on.
We wanted to get you on because you've got a pretty fantastic YouTube channel, haven't you? It's quite a superb channel covering, well, why don't you tell us about your channel?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the compliment. I like to think it's decent. I don't know if fantastic, but I'm working on it. Yeah, so it's Example of Play. It's a YouTube channel. It's mostly strategy games, a little bit of other stuff too. I started it about a year and a half ago, and I mostly just wanted to kind of have a creative outlet, just make videos about games. I wasn't really sure what I wanted it to be. And then after trying different kinds of videos, I kind of landed on, I discovered that the ones that got the best response that I seemed to do the best with was making tutorial videos for some of these strategy games, especially like war games, ones that are a little more challenging to learn, and especially ones that don't have good in-game tutorials or good videos out there to teach you how to play it. And so I found that that was kind of the thing I was best at. So I've kind of gone all in on that, though I still make gameplay videos and stuff too, but kind of teaching people to play is what I find most satisfactory about it.
And this came about because you realised that most tutorials suck. Is that about right?
Especially for some war games, smaller strategy games. Some of them, yeah, they struggle with making good tutorials. And sometimes I'd go to look on YouTube to find a tutorial that someone else had made, and I would find that it wasn't the best. And in my head, I thought I could do this better, maybe. And so I worked on that, and I found that I think I'm pretty decent at it. I get a lot of good comments from people. The thing that keeps me going, like what really drives me to keep making them, especially, is when someone comments, "Hey, I bought this game a year ago and I bounced off of it. I couldn't figure it out, and then I watched your video, and now I'm going to download it again and play it." And that's makes you feel really good, like you've helped someone enjoy something that's fun for them.
And what was the first game that you thought you needed a tutorial? What was the one that really kicked it off for you?
Well, yeah, so I'd made videos about a variety of different games, but then the one that I kind of hit my I'll say breakout video has only got a few thousand views, but for me, pretty good. Was I made a video about Advanced Tactics Gold, which is like an older strategy game. It's really interesting. It's kind of like a 4X World War II hex encounter type game, but it's a little confusing to learn how to play because it gives you a lot of freedom in how you play it, but that also makes it hard to get into, and it's really old, so there's not like an in-game tutorial or anything to teach you how to play. You just have to figure it out. And so I made this video about, oh, hey, it got an update, and this is kind of all the stuff that's new, and this is kind of how the game plays if you've never seen it before. And I got a lot of comments of, hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? Can you like make another video about this game? So then I made a couple more videos on it, and those got really good response, got a few thousand views on those, and people saying, oh, hey, I watched your video and now I understand how to play this game. And so I was like, oh, I think I've found maybe what I'm good at, making videos. And no one else had made a video about that game in years and years, so that helped too. Kind of a niche market.
Do you not think it speaks something negative about the gaming industry that it's relying on small creators to actually produce tutorials for games? Should that not be the responsibility of the developer?
Well, I mean, for bigger games, a big studio that's got dozens of employees, and has a lot of more budget and time, it's kind of an expectation that they're going to teach you how to play their game. With some of these games, like war games, smaller strategy games from these small studios, they don't have a whole lot of people. And I know making like an interactive tutorial that has pop-ups and it has all these things like move teaches you to play the game, that adds a lot of burden for developing the game. Because I tried my hand at game development like a decade ago, and I know adding anything extra is hard. It takes time, and if you're a small set of people trying to make a game, that's a burden. So I don't necessarily blame people for that. I think really the core thing that I've got out of this that I think is kind of my skill set, I use it in my regular job, and then I think I'm pretty good at here, is just being good at communicating. So conveying complex information, going over these games that have a lot of systems, have a lot of mechanics, and being able to communicate that to people where it's easy for them to understand and grasp and kind of pick up and carry and go with it.
I suppose that with these small developers, I mean, I'll put my cynical head on for a moment. Once they've made the sale, they've made the sale. So do they really need to bother with putting a tutorial in?
Well, that's yeah. I mean, that's a good question. Of it's out the door, but I think you get better word of mouth, get better reviews. A game, you go on Steam, for example, and you see if a game's got mixed reviews, and a lot of the comments are, "This game's confusing. I don't know how to play it." It's going to scare people away. People are gonna. I think one that jumps to mind is like the Graviteam tactics games, like probably gonna say this wrong, Menace Front. Those are, it's kind of like combat mission, but a little different. Kind of the common thing about that is that it's really hard to learn how to play. Even if I tried to play one of them a long time ago, even if you read the manual for that, it's confusing. It's not clear. And I think part of that's a language barrier between where it's made in English and everything. But a game that's hard to learn, and that shows up in the reviews of like, I couldn't figure this game out, I couldn't play it, that's going to scare away other buyers. And so that, I think it's part of a marketing thing of, if your game is easy to grasp, or at least you can learn to play it, that's going to help sell more copies beyond the initial wave.
Yeah, and I guess it's an intrinsic part of strategy games that they are more complex than, say, for example, a first-person shooter or a racing game where you just mash buttons.
Yeah, I was thinking when we were getting ready to do this, I was kind of thinking of good examples of games teaching you to play in different ways. For strategy games, you kind of need some instruction, you need some explanation of what you're doing. I was thinking about maybe one of the great all-time examples of a game that teaches you how to play without telling you anything is like the original Super Mario Brothers, where the first level, World 1-1, it teaches you, hey, how to jump, that there's enemies, that you can defeat them, that there's blocks that you can hit, and some of them don't do anything, and some of them give you a power-up. You have to run and jump over a gap, and then run and jump up a high thing. Like that first level, it teaches you a lot of the fundamental mechanics of the game without telling you a single word. You just learn it through the level design, through what you have to do to play the game. But of course, for like a war game, that's not really going to work. You can come on the map and you can click on things, but you're not really going to know what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, one good example, I think, of a strategy game that did a tutorial really well was the original Rome Total War. And did you ever play the tutorial in that? It starts with a real-time battle. Do you remember playing that one?
Oh, yes. Yeah, Rome Total War. I played Shogun Total War. I remember that. I think that was one of my original strategy gaming obsessions, was getting into those first few Total War games. But yeah, any game like that where it has sort of a campaign for you, where it steps you through, I think this is kind of like the best kind of tutorials, where it starts you with some action, so you're kind of doing something fun to start, something simple. It tells you, hey, I don't remember exactly the scenario in the original Rome Total War. I was thinking Rome 2 Total War. I can remember that one because I've played it more recently. You have a small force and there's a big battle going on, and it says, hey, move your guys, go help with this big battle. And so you're learning the mechanics of a battle, but your scale, you're just one small part of it, so you're not really responsible for the whole big thing. It's not overwhelming. It's pretty straightforward. And I think a lot of the games that have the best learning experiences are those where it kind of builds, gives you something simple to start, and then gradually builds and then ties it to a narrative. So it gives you kind of a why, not just you can press X to do Y. You have like a reason for what you're doing. It makes sense to you in context.
So it's almost like it's teaching you to play the game without you realizing that it's teaching you to play the game.
Right. Yeah. Just kind of bits and pieces as you go. And so I try to, whenever I make my videos, that's how I kind of try to structure them. If a game and this is, I'll go back to kind of a complaint about not just the in-game tutorials, and not to be critical of my fellow YouTubers. But one thing I noticed of some other videos that I watched trying to learn a game was, you click on and you say, okay, tutorial for whatever game, and you pull it up and you see someone's made 10 videos about this game of how to play it, and you watch the first video and it's 45 minutes long, and the first 30 minutes is some guy sitting at the main menu just talking about the game and not doing like trying to give you every single possible detail without actually playing the game. And that's, it's boring. It's not teaching you anything. You're not going to remember any of that really.
No.
And it's not what you're there for. You're there, you want to learn how to play the game. So whenever I make my videos, I try to start, and it depends on the game. Some you kind of have to start at the beginning, but I try to start with some kind of action, some kind of moving a unit, doing anything just as soon as possible. So I don't want to be on the main menu for more than 15 seconds if I can help it. And that's mostly just to show, hey, here's how you start the game. And some of them I've done start like kind of in media res, start with a battle or something, and then back up to the menu and say, okay, before you get there, we have to create the game first, and here's how you do that. But doing it of, I'm going to teach you how to get into the game and play it. I'm not going to try to explain every single possible thing to you from the get-go. I'm just going to say, hey, here's how you need to make your first move so you're playing the game and doing something.
Yeah, it's got to be infotainment, hasn't it?
Yes, it needs to be. You're not there for a lecture. You're there, you want to play the game. You don't want to be go to a seminar about it for an hour before something happens.
No, and I suppose also as a YouTuber as well, you also are very aware of viewer retention and things like that. And you're right, if someone's sat on the main menu for 15 minutes with nothing happening, most people have an attention span of a goldfish. They're not gonna stick around for that, are they?
Yeah, you got to give them a little meat, something fun happening on the screen, just as soon as possible. I tried experimenting with my channel, different intros, different things, and I've kind of settled on now of just the absolute bare minimum. Like, hey, you're here. This is what we're going to talk about today. This is what this video is. Let's go.
So can you think of any games, I'll put you on the spot, and let's hope that developers don't listen to this. Can you think of any games where the learning curve is so steep and the tutorials are so bad, or the lack of them is there, that just makes it such a barrier of entry that people are just going to not bother playing?
Well, so I'll talk about not necessarily that it's bad, just that it could be better, or kind of my white whale of gaming that I'm still trying to learn to play, but that I fully intend to make a series about sometime soon. So Shadow Empire, have you ever played that or seen it?
I've heard of it, but I've never played it.
So it's actually the same guy who did the Advanced Tactics Gold, but it's a much more layered game. It's kind of like it's like a war game. It's hexes. You're moving counters around, but it's got logistics. It's got city building. It's got economics. It's got politics. All this stuff kind of layered on this turn-based strategy game. It's like a 4X war game with all this other stuff like Crusader Kings levels of characters and do they like you or not, all these things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost impossible to learn to play because there's no tutorial. If you read the manual, I forget now, but it's hundreds of pages long, the way I remember it. And it's not always clear. It gives you a ton of information, but it's not necessarily teaching you how to play the game. And so that's one game that's on my list to kind of conquer, both for myself and for teaching to other people. And there's a DLC for it coming out. They haven't given a date, but sometime soon that's going to add more to the politics part of the game. So like government politics and coups and all these different kind of movements and things. So that sounds really cool. And so that's kind of my challenge to myself, is that I'm going to teach people how to play Shadow Empire, because that's a extremely complex game that doesn't really have, at least since the last time I played it, does not really teach you how to play it very well.
Shadow Empires, looking at the Steam reviews, it's very positive. So maybe people don't share your view that it's bad when it comes to its tutorial.
I mean, probably for the people who stick into it and play, there's nothing bad about the game. It's just, it's hard. There's a barrier for entry, I guess is what I'm saying. And I want to kind of help to lower that, make it easier for more people to get into the game, because that's the thing. It's a really cool game. I've played it some. It's very interesting. Every time you play it, it's a little different. You can generate lots of different worlds and scenarios. Sometimes you're just fighting against, like, it's sort of like a Mad Max world. Sometimes there's like an army of giant ants that you're fighting, alien things. it's a great game. The problem is I just want to help people to learn how to play it better. So it's kind of like my challenge to myself. So not saying it's anything bad about it, just that there's a barrier there.
For me personally, I steer away from games where there is a significant learning curve. Maybe it's my advanced age, I just don't have the attention span anymore. But I think that your channel could maybe be a help with that.
Yeah, those are the comments, like I said, that fuel me are the ones where someone says something like, "Hey, I didn't think I could learn how to play this game, but I watched your video and it makes sense to me now." And then I even have people start playing the game and then come back and ask me questions of like, "Oh, I'm this far into it, and how do I do this and how do I do that?" And so just knowing I've helped people actually get into these games that are great games, but maybe have a barrier to entry there, kind of helping them get past that is what really makes me want to keep doing the channel.
It must give you a good feeling to know that you've helped people like that.
Yeah, it feels pretty good, and it's kind of using a skill set. I was thinking earlier about what maybe helped me to be decent at doing this, and it sounds really boring, but in college I took this class that I didn't really want to take. I had to take it for some reason, but it's technical writing.
All
And it was a
right.
class literally about writing manuals, like a user manual for anything. And it wasn't very exciting at the time. I thought, why would anyone want to take a class on how to write a manual? But I think I actually learned a lot from it, of the whole idea of, take a task that no matter how complex it is and no matter how many steps there are to it, you take that and then find a way to break it down and explain clearly and succinctly, like, how do you do this so that by the time you get to the end of it, you know everything you need to know to do it. And I think that class actually equipped me with a skill for life of explaining things to people.
I miss manuals, man. It was just part of the joy of, and I'm going back to the era of big box games. It was part of the joy of getting a new game and breaking the seal and opening it up, and that big thick book telling you all
Oh,
about,
absolutely.
And I think that we've lost that with the age of digital downloads. And I know that often you get a PDF, but it's just not the same, is it?
No, it's not. I will say my favorites. I had Age of Empires 2 and Warcraft 3. I remember reading the manuals for those so many times, especially Age of Empires. Like, I think my interest of history came from reading the Age of Empires 2 manual and reading about all the different units and the different civilizations and everything, and thinking, oh, that's really interesting. I want to know more about these people or this kind of thing.
So was that how you got started with video games then? Was it games like Age of Empires? I know you mentioned Shogun Total War as well.
Yeah, so I think my first games were on the NES, like Mario and that sort of thing. And then I play all kinds of different games, but at some point I definitely landed on strategy games to be my favorite. Playing like Command and Conquer, Age of Empires, and then somehow it's hard to think now in 2025, but there was a time when somehow I went to the mall as like a young teenager and went into I think it was like EB Games, like a gaming store in the mall, and they had a boxed copy of Combat Mission Barbarossa to Berlin, like the special edition that had all these mods and stuff on a second disc, and you could load all the mods. I just think now, you couldn't walk into a GameStop and find anything besides like a Blizzard games, maybe Microsoft. Certainly not, some random small studio war game that appeals to how many people. But yeah, I found that, and that kind of got me hooked on war games, of just learning the history and the detail and stuff that's more realistic, on top of, but I still like all kinds of strategy games.
What was the first strategy game you remember playing?
I know, like, I rented Super Nintendo games. There was one that's called like PTO, Pacific Theater of War, something like that. And I remember I was terrible at it. I didn't understand what I was trying to do. I could never figure it out as a kid. I rented it several times, but I just remember thinking, oh, it's so interesting to think about this kind of large scale conflict of, all these different things going on and how to combine them together, to form some kind of strategy to win. And then somewhere in there, I got a PC, and probably the earliest strategy games were like Command and Conquer, At my school, the computer lab, they had someone had put the demo for Close Combat on there, one of those close combat games, and so I played that, and I was pretty much hooked on strategy games. And then like Shogun Total War, Rome Total War, Age of Empires, Warcraft 3, all that kind of stuff. I always loved those more than anything else.
It's quite interesting that you mentioned the first strategy game that you played was on the Super Nintendo, because you don't see very many successful strategy games, be them RTS, turn-based or whatever, on consoles, do you?
Yeah, not as many, and I think just played into it might just for the console you had the simpler controls, especially back then, and it was just easier to make more action oriented games and less. But now it's interesting now that a lot of strategy games do cross over on the consoles, and I always wondered, how do these handle? But the controls are, they're usually pretty decent, or they figure out some kind of way to make it work.
Yeah, but I suppose only the ones from big studios, AAA titles. You're not going to get an indie game on a console, are you?
Right, definitely a bigger barrier to crossing over, making it work on there. One that's kind of springs to mind that's kind of universal, but it has pretty simple controls is like Into the Breach. I played that on the Switch, and that's certainly, it's kind of a little bit of a puzzle game, but a really deep thinking game of like trying to figure out what moves you're going to make and different strategies depending on which units you have and scenario you're facing. So they've crossed over some, but then yeah, there's a lot of games that there's just a lot of clicking and too much going on to really translate it to a console controller.
You said earlier, I just want to pick up on something you mentioned before, that you almost became a game designer.
Well, that was kind of one of those things when I was a kid. That was the dream job for a while, was to go and be a video game developer or a programmer and work on those. And then it just never panned out. I think when I was a teenager, I bought a book to try to learn how to program. And I didn't understand it enough, didn't have anyone to go to for help, because I kind of grew up in a rural, out in the country area, so there wasn't anyone else interested in things like that for the most part. And then back then I had the internet, but there just wasn't as much assistance. It was just harder to get started. And so then about 10 years ago or so, when I was a little older, I picked up a book that used Unity, which makes it a lot easier to kind of get started. You don't have to build everything from scratch. It kind of gives you the building blocks, the foundation to get started. And I went through that book and I learned how to make some really simple games, just following along in there. And then I made sort of, I'll say original, a kind of like a little card game that is actually my wife's family plays this card game that I think they just made it up. It's really simple, but I made it. I took the card game. In the book, it showed you how to make a certain kind of card game, and I altered that to make this card game. And so I count that as my one original game that I made, that only I'm the only person who's ever played it, but I did make it. But it was really fun to program a game and make it work. But it was also, it revealed to me how, players a lot of times will say, hey, developer, why don't you make your game do this or that? Why don't you add this to it? You really should. And it's a lot of work. Adding anything extra beyond the foundation, it takes time, it takes effort. You have to make it work right. You have to make it look right. It's a very meticulous, tedious process, especially if there's only, one person working on the game or just a few people. And so I kind of gained a greater understanding of it's to ask someone to add something to their game that you think is simple. It seems simple, but it might not be. It might be a lot of work for them to add it. So like a tutorial, like an interactive tutorial where the game takes a hold and teaches you how to do it and shows you, all of those things are like extra mechanics that aren't really core to the game. They're only there for the tutorial. And so that's a lot of extra work for the developer.
Yeah, I was talking to the developers of Sanctuary Shattered Sun, which is an RTS, which the demo should be out later this year. And what they are planning on doing is using the demo as a tutorial as well. So they want to be able to teach you everything about how to play the game inside that tutorial. And that just seemed like quite a refreshing method of getting out there and showing people how to play.
Yeah, and I think that's a good approach, because that way anyone who comes to the game, if they play that demo, they're going to learn how to play the game in the demo, and they're going to come away with a better experience versus if they're just dropped in and they don't really know what they're doing, and they're just trying to, half the struggle is figuring out how they're supposed to play the game. It's going to give a bad impression. So if you're teaching them and you kind of package it together, so workflow wise for the developers, it's kind of combining two birds with one stone kind of thing.
So if you had all the time in the world, then, Joe, to watch hundreds of hours of YouTube tutorials on how to be a game dev, what game would you build?
Well, that's that is a really great question. I think the game that I've always been curious to see it work, or it's maybe not a specific idea, but kind of a general idea, is a game. I think the closest thing I've seen is kind of like this. Not exactly. Have you ever played Off-World Trading Company?
I haven't, but I have heard of it, but I haven't played it.
It's sort of like it's kind of like a stock market RTS base builder thing where you're landing on, I think, Mars at first, and there's other planets later. But and if you play, I never played it in multiplayer because I think anyone who's dedicated to it would have smoked me. So I just played against the AI. But it's sort of a short match, relatively short match, but it's not entirely dependent on being able to click really fast or, actions per minute. It's more about being able to look at the situation, the resources, the economics, and kind of the big game. Basically, you're collecting these resources, you build a little base, but really it's about, you're playing the stock market and you're trying to be profitable and figure out, based on all the elements you're seeing and what your opponents are doing, win economically more so than anything else. And it's a relatively short match. And so the game I've always been curious to see would be one that's multiplayer, that is like a space, like economic trading game. And you could play it in multiplayer, and maybe a match would last like an hour or two. And you would go out and you'd build kind of like the X games, like X4, where you're building this economic empire, like you're mining, you're building factories, you're producing stuff and shipping it around to different places. But also there's combat, there's pirates and aliens, and there's some threats, so you got to protect your stuff too. So my dream game that I've always thought of would be sort of like a 4X RTS, but not fast paced, kind of slow paced over a few hours, where you build like a trading empire, like a business, and you're building mining facilities, and you're building cargo haulers and sending them around and trying to win this economic simulation that's getting more complex as the game goes along, as more people build things. That's my dream game I've always wanted to kind of see. There's games that are kind of like that, but I've never found one that kind of quite captures what would be cool to me.
So in a persistent world,
maybe not. Maybe either like a short, like a kind of medium length match where you're playing online, or maybe like a persistent world where it resets, like where you don't feel like you're falling behind because you haven't been playing since day one. Something like that, like an economic space game where that's the focus, and you can kind of jump in, and not like Eve, where I've played Eve Online a long time ago, and that's, you're committing yourself for years to play that game and win at it. But something like that kind of concept, but on a shorter time scale.
I played Eve Online, and the thing that put me off was the lack of a tutorial. I just couldn't work it out. So maybe it's a very different game. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around at first. Yeah, but the amount of investment that people put into that game is it's out of this world. Excuse the pun, but it is, isn't it? It's there's just so much time and effort that goes into it.
Yeah, and I think, kind of going off on a tangent on EVE Online, what makes it so interesting is it does require that time and investment, but at the same time, you get these unique experiences out of it. Well, I've read more of the experiences than I've actually experienced playing it off and on, but just the idea of, someone being a spy in a corporation and working their way up just to get access to information to sabotage these other real players over the span of months or years. That's something you can't really get without that big commitment, and without those really kind of complex free-form systems. So it's definitely a trade-off, but it gives some unique stuff to that game.
That's an intense commitment, isn't it?
Yeah.
So have you found any success, when you're working on a tutorial video? Do you ever use forums, Discord, Reddit? Do you find that those particular mediums are at all helpful for helping people learn how to play?
Definitely a go. Usually, if there's something I'm not sure about, I'll search for it and I'll find an answer. Someone else, if I'm not sure, someone else has been unsure before, and that's a good way to find little bits and pieces, especially when you read the manual for the game and it's not clear. It kind of explains it, but not entirely. So sometimes I'll go searching for little bits of information, or like on Steam, a lot of people make guides for games, and I don't want to say I steal from them, but I'll go look through it and make sure I'm not missing anything. That I'm not leaving any big gaps in what I'm trying to cover.
And I suppose those particular sites are also useful for finding out what people are struggling with as well, give you ideas for videos as well.
For sure, yeah. You can go in there and people are asking a lot of questions, and then I'll know, hey, I should talk about this. Sometimes I'll get comments on videos. Someone will ask a question of how to do something, and so I'll just kind of take a note of that and incorporate it into the next video for that game. If it kind of fits in, try to cover that part, whatever they're not sure about.
Okay, moving on from our main topic here then. Have you seen any games recently which have excited you that you really want to get your hands on and try?
Well, so yes, I got a couple that I'm really looking forward to. We already talked about Shadow Empire, the new DLC for that, which I think is going to be where I'm going to try to get back into the game, both because I want to play it and to kind of teach other people. That might be a good launching off point to get more people into the game. I have two other games I'm really looking forward to. One everyone knows about, and then one's a little smaller. But Europa Universalis 5 has been announced, and we've seen some of that. And so I'm a big Paradox player, going back to Europa 3, I think was the first one I played. And then I haven't played Victoria 3, but I think I've played every single other game since then that they've put out. And I used to put a lot of time into those, and then I kind of slacked. I had kids, so a little less free time to commit to those games. But definitely looking forward to 5. I think I listened to some podcasts about it, some people that had played it, and they discussed that it's kind of a step back towards complexity, where like Crusader Kings 3, some people thought it made the game a little too simple. I don't know if you're familiar with, you have sort of like mana points, is what people call it, of you accumulate points over time to take actions, and so the game becomes kind of figuring out how to accumulate those points as fast as you can to kind of abstractly do things. In Universalis 5, from what they said in that podcast, they were talking about that it definitely takes a swing back towards things being complex, of having lots of mechanisms and lots of systems. And so I think that's exciting to me, both as a player. I want to see a game like that. I want it to be kind of complex, because that's going to be more fun for me to kind of figure it out. And then also it'll be really good for my channel, making videos about that. I think that could be a good one to really cover in depth and get a lot of people to see those and learn how to play the game.
So you could have an entire series with a game that complex, couldn't you?
Oh yeah. I think some games I just do 1 or 2 videos. I think the longest series I've done was Distant Worlds 2. I did like 8 videos on that recently. And so you kind of get diminishing returns on the more videos that you do on one thing, but sometimes it's easier to break out those concepts into separate videos, I try to keep them definitely under an hour, and more like 30 minutes seems to be kind of the sweet spot for, retaining viewers that long.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to overwhelm people, do you?
Yeah, and it's easier to break it down into like a manageable, I'm going to watch this video and learn how to do A and B, and then once you understand that, then you go to the next video, learn about C and D.
So resource management, and then combat, and then empire management, and things like that, and diplomacy. I suppose all these different subjects all require an individual video.
Right. And I think they're easier to understand when they're broken out into pieces instead of trying to do it all at once. So yeah, one thing when I make my videos is I don't try to teach people to play the game optimally. The idea isn't to say, I'm going to show you how to be really good at this game. The idea is I'm going to show you how the mechanics work so you understand how to play the game. And then I'm going to leave being good at the game to you to figure out yourself. There was a few games early on. I tried to do some let's play kind of things. I think one I did was like Xenonauts 2, which is kind of like XCOM. I did a let's play series on that, and what it ended up being was there was like one guy who went from video to video, watched every video, and would give me like paragraphs of here's what you did wrong, here's how you can be better, this is what the optimal moves would be to do. And not that he wasn't being mean about it, but it really humbled me of like, there's people who are way, way better at this game than I am. So my job is not to be really good at the game or show you how to be really good at the game. My goal is just, I'm going to show you how to play the game and let you figure out how to be good at it.
So it's not about making people great at games. It's giving them the building blocks to be able to learn how to be good themselves.
Right. Just getting them through the door, getting them started, and then they can figure out how to be good at it themselves. And then also it helps me because then I don't have to feel like I have to be really good at a game to teach you how to play it. I thought of it as I'm kind of like a teacher who's studying the material the night before I go teach it to the students. So I haven't mastered it necessarily, but I understand it enough to help you understand it.
You said there was two games. There was Europa Universalis, and then there was one other as well, a smaller game, I think you said.
Yeah. So yeah, the other one, I'm really looking forward to this because I think it checks all my boxes. It's called Menace. It's from the same developers that did Battle Brothers. Battle Brothers it's kind of like a cross between XCOM and Mountain Blade. So you have this like little mercenary band of warriors going around in like a fantasy setting. And what makes it kind of like XCOM is each individual has like a name and they have skills, and you equip them. You can give them armor and weapons and they level up. But if they die, they're dead. They're gone. And so you kind of roam the land doing quests and helping people and making your little mercenary company get gradually stronger. So I think it's a really great game. This Menace is from them, and it's supposed to be out later this year. And it kind of takes some of those ideas, but it's a sci-fi game. So it's a little bit like I'm not going to try to explain it because if you go read the Steam page for it, it goes on and on and on about all the different systems in the game. But it's a little bit like an XCOM. You have like a battleship that's your home base, and you have these squad, instead of individual soldiers, you have squads, and you have like squad leaders that are characters that can die, but they can also level up and get stronger, and they have a story, and you're sort of traveling around this star system, taking on jobs and helping people or doing this and that and gathering more people to your organization. But then there's also like an overall story going on, and it looks really cool. Like you've got APCs and mechs, and your spaceship can give you like fire support from orbit and stuff like that. But it's like a turn-based game like XCOM, but with this persistent mission-to-mission overall strategy layer going on too.
Oh yeah, I've seen this actually. Yeah, from Hooded Horse, isn't it?
Yeah, they're the publisher on it, and then the developer is the Battle Brothers developer.
I remember seeing this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me that it checks all my boxes. Yeah, it's described as a turn-based tactical RPG, which is all my favorite things, all wrapped up together in sci-fi.
It looks quite excellent, actually. Yeah, I saw the one myself. I think I saw it on Twitter, or X, as it's now called, the festering cesspit. Mm-hmm. And it did look quite interesting. So Menace and Europa I can never say it. Europa Universalis. That's about right, isn't it?
I think you got it. That was it right there.
It was Project Caesar. It's the worst kept secret in the world, I think.
Mm-hmm. They had to make it. They had no choice.
Because you would have gone over there and you would have stood over them and made them do it.
Yeah, I remember when 4 came out. That's all I played for 2 or 3 months when that came out. So I'm definitely looking forward to 5.
Is there a release date yet for that?
I think it's just coming soon. I don't know if they've said any kind of date. There are playable versions of it. People have played it, but yeah, I think it's still a little ways out. Probably like early next year is what I'd kind of heard, but no guarantees on that.
So what's next on Example of Play?
Well, right now I've got kind of a variety of things going on. So part of my experimenting with the channel, doing this and that, was I'd done the Distant Worlds 2 series, like I said, a couple months ago, and that went on for 8 episodes, and I felt like that went on too long. So then I thought, well, instead of doing that, I'll rotate between different games. And so I kind of dug myself into a hole where I've got 3 or 4 different shorter series all going on at the same time. And I realized that's too challenging, trying to jump between different games and understand them all in my head at the same time. So I'm not going to do that anymore, but I'm going to try to finish those out. And those are right now a couple from War Game Design Studio, which does some kind of hardcore war game type stuff.
Yeah.
So that the Proud and the Few, which is mostly about the Marines in the Pacific in World War II. And it's a very small scale tactical game. And then Poland 39, which is their most recent one, and it's about the war in Poland in World War II. So kind of an interesting topic that you don't see a whole lot, but a whole game just about that. Much larger scale where you're moving around battalions instead of individual squads. But the mechanics are similar. It uses kind of the same bones for the system. I had the one other one I've kind of got going was Dominions 6, which was kind of, I just wanted to learn how to play that myself. I'd always tried to play those Dominions games and couldn't figure it out. So I decided I'm going to make a series about it so I understand it.
That Poland 39 game, I think Nuno and I discussed that when we did our episode, which came out on the anniversary of D-Day. He talks very highly of it. You've tried it. It's good. Recommend it?
Yeah, I've made a couple of videos about it. I mean, it's definitely for kind of the war game crowd, like War in the East, that kind of thing, where you're looking at, depending on the scenario you play, there are a lot of smaller scenarios where you've only got, they're pretty manageable. You've only got like a dozen units, couple dozen units, and then you can scale it all the way up to there are scenarios that cover the entire war, which, I mean, the war may have only lasted for a month, but if you're playing that full scenario, you're controlling basically the entire force for Poland or the entire force for Germany, down to like the battalion level. So you've got a lot of units on the map, very detailed, but also easy to play, easier than I thought it would be, because it is so detailed and there's a lot going on with it. But really, I made the 2 videos, and now I'm going to make a 3rd video that's going to just cover a few little smaller topics like how to use engineers and that kind of thing. But overall, the game is actually, I'll plug my channel. You can watch my videos. It takes about an hour and you'll know 90% of what you need to know to play the whole game.
Plug away, Matt. And the link to your channel will be in the description of this podcast episode, and also on the YouTube video accompanying it as well. That pretty much takes us to the point where we'll close. Any final thoughts?
No, just thanks for having me here. I kind of mentioned before, I made an attempt at doing a podcast years ago, and I realized it was too much work. It was kind of like a scripted history podcast, and so it was more work than I wanted to do. So my hat's off to you for doing a podcast and interviewing so many different people and covering so many topics, because I know it's a lot of work to make all that stuff come together and produce a good product. So I've really enjoyed your podcast since you started doing it, and it fills kind of a gap. There's not a whole lot of people out there covering these kind of strategy games. So I'm a big fan. So it's really cool to be able to come on here and talk about these games. Every time I listen to them, I'm like, oh, I know about that game. I know about that one. So it's right up my alley.
Well, thanks very much. That warms my soul to know that at least at least somebody enjoys what we do.
I think a lot of people do.
Yeah, it is. I'm not going to say it's difficult. It's very intense, and there's a lot to do. But it's given me an opportunity to speak to people that I never would have had the chance to, including yourself. So thanks very much for coming on and chatting to me. It's really appreciated. And come back again sometime. You're very welcome.
Well, I'd be happy to talk some more strategy games.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. That's it from this episode of Critical Moves podcast. If you go to criticalmovespodcast.com, you'll find all of the links for our social media, for our Discord. Joe is on our Discord as well, so come along and say hi. You'll see him there. You can quiz him about the games that he plays, and we'll see you next week. Thanks very much. Take it easy. Goodbye.